Chapter 9 was all about creating questionnaires and surveys to use in your research. So, a lot of you are going to be using surveys or questionnaires as part of your research proposal. So, I wanted to make sure to go over this. We were supposed to read it last week, but I forgot to include it. So, I'm just going to include the lecture here, and you can use it as a reference to go back, especially when you are using your article critiques and then if it's in your research proposal. So, the first thing that I want to talk about are some of the tenets that you need to keep in mind if you're going to be creating your own questionnaire or your own survey. And then after this, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to find existing questionnaires if you want to use that in your research. So the first one is simplicity. So it's important when you are creating a questionnaire that you keep the questions simple, that they are as direct as possible, as short as possible. You're avoiding jargon and making sure that you are keeping the readability level in mind to make sure that the comprehension is not the issue and that your research participants understand what you're asking and that your results reflect that instead of some type of issue with how the question was written. So keeping it simple is the first principle. The next one is to avoid a double barrel question. And a double barrel question is when you end up asking two questions at once. And so this can be confusing and impact your research results because you're not sure if your participants are answering the first part or the second part. So for instance, should senior citizens be given more money for recreation centers and food assistant programs? So you're asking them about two different things. And so if they say yes, you're not sure which one they're agreeing to. And if they say no, you're not sure if they disagree with both or one or the other. So it's important to make sure that each question is only asking one thing or addressing one concept. And then a loaded question. We've been talking a lot about bias throughout this semester. And so this is something that can come through in the wording. And so it does require a lot of revising to make sure that there's no loaded questions or biases. In a loaded question is like when you're asking a leading question and it is clear your opinion in there. Like, do you favor eliminating the wasteful excesses in public school budgets? So that wasteful word. And this is similar to, we see this issue a lot with elections. A lot of times the questions, especially for special issues, are worded in ways that many people view as loaded. Also negative wording, making sure that you are framing your question simple, readable, and in the positive. So for instance, do you feel that the city should not approve the proposed women's shelter? Instead of asking it as a negative, you should say, should the city approve the women's shelter? And then yes saying and nay saying, like making sure that it's not all just yes or no. And this is more so referring to the order of the questions, making sure that you don't have all yeses and then all no's. So mixing up the order. And the chapter 9 goes into depth about how you can vary the question types, making sure that your scale is changing. So it's the same concept, but sometimes you ask them and the result will be a strongly disagree, and then sometimes a strongly disagree. So in the chapter, they go through some different scales that you can use. A lot of you might be used to the 1 through 5 scale or even 1 through 7. The chapter is really useful to give you some question stems for things like beliefs, attitudes, and give you some ideas for that. Let me show you that very quickly. Actually, well, I'll go to that next. So for instance, here, are you in favor of the boss's whim to cut lunchtime to 30 minutes? So here you can see it's a loaded question because there is the whim. You can see the researcher's opinion or bias in there. Restaurants should not have to be inspected each month. So that is negative wording. I would describe myself as funny and intelligent. Here you see a double barrel question because you have two parts there. Do you support the legislation that would unfairly tax hardworking farmers? Again, a loaded question. I enjoy studying and spending time with friends on the weekends, double barrel. And professors should not be required to take daily attendance. 1 strongly agree, 5 strongly agree. Again, that's a negative wording question. So let me show you in the chapter where you can find those helpful question stems if you're designing your own questionnaire or survey. Okay, this is exhibit 9.2, and these are commonly used response categories. So like for agreement, some scales that you can use here: amount, approval, belief, comparison, effectiveness, evaluation, frequency, importance, knowledge, performance, probability, satisfaction. So if you find that you are writing your own questionnaire or survey, this will be very helpful for you in framing that wording here. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about is using an existing survey. In chapter 9, the authors explain that if there's already a survey or a measure or a tool that already exists that has good reliability, that you should use that instead of creating your own. So Georgia State has a little research guide about how you can find existing surveys. So this is the research guide. You can find that online. But I went to the APA site test for an example. So here is that research guide, and then they also go through just some background about how, when you're creating your own, how you need to conceptualize the construct that you're looking at, then operationalize that construct, and then think about indicators that will show you the presence or absence of that construct. So here is the research guide about how to find existing surveys and questionnaires and scales and ratings. So here is the link to the APA site test. Here they go through just some guides about how to read them, how to cite them, how to identify the reliability and validity of those measures. So really helpful information here. I'll link this below in the YouTube description, and then also in Perusal on the right. So I went ahead and I went to this APA site test, and I just searched for engagement. I know that this is something that a few people mentioned for their research proposal that they were going to be looking at. And so here you can see some of the results that came up: school engagement scale. So you can click through here and then go back to the research guide so you can see where to find the PDF, where to cite it, the year, the description, and then the reliability and validity if that's available. Here, detriments of behavioral engagement and e-learning, participation and engagement scale. That one's probably not so good. Schoolwork engagement inventory, self-regulation, work engagement, blended synchronous learning. So as you can see, there's quite a few existing surveys and measures that already exist. So for those of you who are planning survey or questionnaires as part of your research design, I encourage you to use this tool to search what are the existing tools that already exist, and see if you could find one that you might be able to use that is appropriate for your study. Now, of course, you can create your own, but you would create your own if one doesn't already exist. So that would be a case where it's really specific to your particular research site. So that is chapter 9. So let me know in the comments if you are thinking of using a survey, and if you try out this tool, this database to search. If you find anything interesting that might be of interest to anyone in the class, please let us know what you find there.